from the Washington, D.C. area. It's the Inside Scoop, all the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Good evening. Welcome to the show. I'm Jeff Barnett. Tonight we're going to be getting the Inside Scoop from two political heavyweights. In the latter half of the show, we'll be talking with Mark Levine. I think most of you know Mark. He's usually the host of this show. And Mark is running for the Democratic nomination in Virginia's 8th Congressional District. In the first part of the show, however, we're talking with Derek Hyra. Derek is one of Mark's competitors for that nomination in the 8th. The election is in, 22 days from now. Derek is an extraordinary fellow and a very smart fellow, PhD from the University of Chicago. He also went to college on a basketball scholarship, I guess a full ride Division I. Now you were a guard, is that right?
Yeah, Jeff, let me just say it's great to be here. Yeah, I played point guard, and I think for congressional candidates, that's maybe an unusual qualification. But yeah, I played basketball in high school and went on to play college. I had dreams about playing on in the NBA, but I think within my first 2 years of college, I realized that wasn't going to happen, and I started playing a little bit less basketball and hit the books a little harder and set myself up to go on to graduate school.
But your team went to the NCAA championships a couple of years, right?
Yeah, that's right. We in 1995 and 96, we went to the NCAA tournament. We were the 16th seed playing number 1 seed Kansas and UConn, but it was a dream come true to be able to play at that level.
Well, this is fascinating. Well, tonight, let's talk about politics. You're running for the United States Congress. I want you to just tell us, kind of why you're running and what's the biggest thing that you'd like to do when you get to Congress.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really running to refresh the American dream. I mean, we have just come off the Great Recession, which was traumatic for millions of people. Millions of people lost their jobs, lost their homes. It was the biggest economic downturn we've had since the Great Depression. We've come out of that here in Northern Virginia, but we haven't come out of it around the country. I've studied some of the hard-hit cities, Detroit, Kansas City, St. Louis, Chicago. These areas look like they're still in the Great Recession. So, I'm running to try to get policies in place that will balance the housing market. I think if we balance the housing market, we can start to grow the economy again at a rate people would like to see. 20% of our national economy is wrapped up in the housing market, and we need to have reforms that stabilize that market so that we can grow the housing market and then subsequently grow the U.S. economy.
And what kind of reforms would stabilize? What do you mean by stabilize the housing market?
Yeah, I think that what we need to do is we have two major institutions, part of our housing finance system, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. These are two institutions that basically went bankrupt during the Great Recession. The government came in, bailed them out. The government now owns those institutions. But we're thinking about trying to get them out of the government's hand, put them back in the private market, but we just haven't been able to make a decision. There's a bill currently in Congress right now, what most have said isn't going to pass in this congressional period. Maybe at the next one it will, and we need to take Freddie and Fannie and either fully privatize them and make them standalone private companies, or we need to bring them into the federal government fully like FHA. I think either one of those solutions would go a long way to balancing the housing market.
Now, there's a lot of people in this area that work for Freddie. I mean, it's headquartered in the Tysons area, and Fannie is in Northwest D.C.
Yeah.
So what do you say to the people who are probably your future constituents that work for those?
Right. It's not a question of whether we would downsize them and have people laid off. It's just a question of whether they'd be private workers or public sector workers. But we need those institutions to ensure that there's liquidity in the housing market and that people can get loans and that we keep our home ownership at a very high rate. I mean, we have one of the highest home ownership rates in the world. It's about 64% right now, and if we want to have it go a little bit higher, or at least keep that and maintain that, we've got to keep these important finance institutions.
When I talk to a lot of young people today, their vision is not so much of owning a home. A lot of young people kind of see rentals as kind of the way that they're going to be housing themselves for a long time because the economy is so rapidly changing. They need to have mobility. are we kind of, when we go to bat for Freddie and Fannie, are we kind of fighting the last war here, or is that compatible with any changes to the home ownership paradigm?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I think we've learned in the last 5 years or so that maybe a 69% home ownership rate was too high, and that's where we were in about 2006 and 7, and now it's dipped. And we also, there was some speculation that with the Great Recession, we'd have a whole generation of people who didn't want to own a home. Right. But actually, there's been some surveys out there, and looking at people's desire to own a home has maintained even through this Great Recession period.
Okay. Obviously, home ownership is only a theoretical goal if there's not a robust economy. Growing the economy is one of your priorities. So what do we know about your ideas, your plans, your vision for growing the United States economy?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is we've had job growth in the last 3 or 4 years, but it hasn't been the growth that most experts predicted we would have. So we've got to think about how do we grow this economy and grow it in a way that increases the number of jobs. Small businesses provide an awful lot of job opportunities for people. I was appointed by President Obama for the Council on Underserved Communities, which was part of the Small Business Administration. And for a year, I worked with about 20 colleagues really looking at the programs of the SBA, and we could reform the 504 program and the 7A program, which provide government guaranteed loans for small businesses. If there is a way to reform those programs that they can delve a little deeper in underserved markets and create small businesses and jobs for low and moderate income people, I think that will be a way that we could grow jobs in a sector of our economy which we've had difficult in doing. When I talk about economic growth, I want to see equitable growth. I want to see growth that lifts all boats, that provides jobs for upper income, middle income, and low and moderate income people. We haven't had that in the United States. I mean, if you look at the last 30 years, we have had economic growth, but we've had growing income inequality. So we need to think about how can we grow the economy in a way that provides opportunities for low and moderate income people as well.
Income inequality, of course, is a huge issue. So when we talk with you about income inequality, what aspect of it would you like to address first?
Yeah, I think there are different ways. There's a lot of talk about one way to reduce income inequality is to just tax the wealthy at a higher rate and redistribute that money through social programs to low and moderate income people. I wouldn't want to tinker with the tax code. I think, again, President Obama has done a good job under his first term. We changed the capital gains taxes. It was at a 15% rate. It is now at a 20% rate. Our annual budget in the federal government is $2.7 trillion. We have the largest economy, the largest revenue. It is a question of how we spend that money, and I think reprioritizing our investments that we make in our people can go a long way to reduce the income inequality. What I would like to see is us spend money on universal pre-K. We know that 0 to 5 is the critical period for kids. That sets a foundation for them. But daycare costs now at that age cost almost as much as a college education. Costs $16,000 annually to provide daycare. We need to figure out in our country how we can provide universal daycare to give all our kids a solid foundation. Once we do that, I think the other thing is once kids do well in school, it is getting more and more difficult to afford college. College costs are rising at a rate even just as high as our healthcare costs. So we need to increase the Pell Grant, which provides grants for kids as they can afford college. But we can't just give money or more money to individuals to go to college. Then the college presidents will just keep rising the tuition costs. So we need to have a serious conversation with university presidents about how can they provide a great college education, but at a lower cost, or maintain the costs, because that's going to be critical. We can't have students coming out of college with $100,000 in debt. If that happens, and it is happening today, right, they will not be able to get a car loan, they will not be able to get a home loan, they will not be able to start and get a loan for a small business. So it's in our country's interests to provide kids with an affordable college degree that doesn't saddle them with debt, so that when they come out, they can invest in their future.
But you teach at the graduate level. Mm-hmm. You're an associate professor of
urban planning at Virginia Tech.
Congratulations. So, getting kids paying for college is that's only like halfway there. For most kids, you've got to go on to a graduate degree or some sort of certification.
Right.
So how do you work that into the calculus?
Yeah. I mean, it's not just having kids get a BA anymore. It used to be, once you got your undergraduate degree, you're sort of all set. And more, students today are going on for their master's degree or for a PhD. And yes, we need to, make sure that when people are making that investment, that there is a rate of return. But the reality is when I went on to get my PhD, the idea wasn't so that I would go make more money. I mean, most people who are college professors, they have a very stable and a decent income, but they're not making what lawyers and investment bankers are making. And so, I think when students make the choice for an advanced degree, they're making a choice that may not necessarily have a great rate of return on the investment, but it is something that then they will have the knowledge base and they'll have a lot of more autonomy and freedom to choose the career that they want.
Okay. We've got about, a minute and a half until the first break. Why don't you just tell us just a little bit about yourself? What are your community involvement right now? Where do you live? Yeah,
I'm a resident of Alexandria in the city. I've been there for 8 years. And the second I got into the city, I really started to get involved in the Democratic Party. I was a precinct captain for 2 years in Cameron Station, the precinct and community I live in on the west end of Alexandria. From there, I went on to serve on the Housing Authority. I served for 4 years, and I wound up being the chair of the Housing Authority in Alexandria and really tried to take the poverty concentrated pockets in Alexandria, which there are some, and create mixed income opportunity neighborhoods. So we really worked on mixed income housing and tried to deconcentrate poverty to provide greater opportunity for the low and moderate income residents. I moved from the Housing Authority onto the Planning Commission, and the deals went from $1 million deals to $50, $60 million deals. But the idea was to try to get affordable housing to be embedded in some of the market rate development and multifamily units that are being developed throughout the city. But my goal has always been to try to create greater opportunities and equitable growth with all the service that I've done.
Excellent. So we'll be back after this break talking with Derek Hyra. We'll be talking about the middle class, Obamacare, strengthening communities, and we'll be talking about other ways that we can find out more about Derek and his run for the United States Congress.
This year, 28,000 Americans will be diagnosed with oral cancer. Every year, 7,000 Americans die of oral cancer.
I'm Eva Cohen, and I'm an oral cancer survivor. I didn't fit the profile. I didn't smoke or drink. I had no family history of cancer, no family history of cancer. I was 31 years old. 31 years old. I went to see my dentist about a sore in my mouth that wouldn't heal. It was oral cancer. I had to have a radical neck dissection and a portion of my tongue reconstructed. I didn't know if I was going to live or die.
I'm Surgeon General Richard Carmona. The survival rate for oral cancer is only 50%. Oral cancer can happen to anyone. If you have a sore or lesion in your mouth that doesn't heal within 2 weeks, see your dentist. Early detection is the key.
Early detection saves lives. I know.
1 in 8 Americans goes hungry. One idea helped change that. A community started a garden that blossomed into farmers markets. 1 in 6 children lives in poverty. One group of women found an answer by opening a daycare center that their neighbors could afford. Today, 36 million Americans live in poverty, but one by one, people are helping themselves and each other to change the picture of poverty to one of hope. For easy ways you can help, visit povertyusa.org.
2 words for you. Pop quiz. Ready? Name any funny movie. A drama. Name a mystery. And one more thing. Name the movie your kids saw today in science class.
Know what really matters. Know about your kid's school. And know about your kid. Find out 100 ways to know more, do more.
to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Jeff Barnett. We're talking with Derek Hyra, candidate for the United States Congress in Virginia's 8th Congressional District. The 8th District, 44% of that is in Fairfax County. The rest of it is Alexandria, Arlington, and then there's a small piece for Falls Church. The election is in 3 weeks and a wake-up, 22 days from now. Derek is a PhD from the University of Chicago. He teaches at Virginia Tech in urban affairs and planning. During the break, or while we were off camera, we started talking a little bit more about the middle class. Federal contractors, federal employees comprise a huge part of your constituency, and everybody else is really within 1 degree of separation from them. So, how do you envision your role in Congress reference, let's take it specifically, federal employees?
Yeah. Well, let me just start by saying that I was a federal employee for 4 years. I worked at the Department of Housing and Urban Development and also worked at the Treasury Department for 2 years. And, I think that maintaining the step increases, maintaining the COLA increases for federal employees is vital. They are the lifeblood and the implementers of our national policy. So we have to maintain their salary. And it is not important only for our nation, but it's critical for this area because there's such a large percent of federal government workers in the 8th Congressional District. But the other part of the equation is not just the federal employees, it's the federal contract workers. And my wife is currently a federal contract worker, so I know that their salaries will always be critical on my agenda because it's critical to my household and making sure I can make my mortgage payment. Again, federal contractors have actually done very well. I mean, part of the reason why this area was stabilized during the Great Recession is because a disproportionate amount of money was pumped out of the federal government into Northern Virginia and the DC metro region. But the federal government now is sort of pulling back with sequestration, and that is troubling to many federal contract workers. I think that what we need to do is make sure that R&D in terms of the military, in terms of the Department of Education, Health and Human Services, that we invest in R&D that goes to the companies that are here in Northern Virginia. Again, that will help stabilize and maintain the economy in Northern Virginia, but the innovation that spins out of that will also help our nation. I mean, if we think about the R&D innovation in the military or the internet, I mean, that has allowed commerce to grow across the world and lowered the cost of doing business in terms of communication. And that was a military innovation that spun out of the military into the private sector. So I think we constantly need to make investments in R&D, which will be important for Northern Virginia, but important for the U.S. economy as a whole.
Yeah. Space, computers, there's a whole litany of areas where military, or the federal government in general, military in particular, not only funded the basic research, but also those, the initial prototypes of engineering, and then demonstrated what could be done. And then people looked at it, smart people looked at it and said, oh, well, now I can take that and do X, Y, and Z. And then we're off. And that is a unique advantage that the American economy has that unfortunately does not get the kind of the play that it should.
Yeah, and I think there's a good example of that in terms of the drones. Now, I'm not a big proponent of drone strikes, but if you think about the technology that's utilized within them, may be an innovator in terms of unmanned aircraft, unmanned vehicles, cars, and other things. So I think that, again, that technology in the future may really stimulate our economy, and we're going to be a leader in that around the world because of the innovation that was spawned within our military R&D.
And that's something that could be really headquartered right here in the 8th District.
Mm-hmm.
Another, you mentioned about drones, and that's kind of a hot button item.
Absolutely.
Another hot button item we used to call it a third rail. It was Social Security, and it used to be a third rail. You'd never touch it, but now it's kind of come off that, and now there's a lot of people, Paul Ryan particularly, have been talking about Social Security. So, what's your take on the path forward for Social Security?
Yeah. Well, it's not just Social Security, it's our other entitlement programs. And when we think about the national debt, how are we going to bring that down? We really have to think deeply about reforming Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Another component that makes a bulk of our national budget is military spending. But to stick with Social Security, it is something that we created during the Depression to provide a safety net for people as they aged. It was a program that drastically reduced poverty among the elderly, and it's been a great program. The problems with that program is sort of a demographic challenge. We have more people who are out of the system who need to receive those benefits than we have paying into the system. So we have to think about how to reform it. I definitely think that we should maintain it, never give up on it, but there are some things we could do. We could raise the age before people receive their benefits. We are actually living longer. We are a healthier society, so maybe increasing the age by 1 year may go a long way in terms of saving us some money. Another way, that's not even reforming this program in particular, but immigration. If we can just get people into our country who are coming here and have them be legalized and being into our system and our payroll system, there'll be more people working and paying into the system, which will create sufficient resources to pay for the people who are going to be receiving the benefits when they retire. So we have to think really strategically on how we're going to make this program work and how we're going to make it work fiscally into the future.
For those of you who are at home, we do have a telephone number that's available. Give us a call. And if you have a question for Derek Hyra, and we'll be glad to ask it for you. Let's go back. Let's just pull on that a little bit more. Some of your competitors for the nomination have talked about raising the cap on Social Security payments. Are you in favor of that?
Yeah, I think raising the cap is another option that we could go with. I think it's a multiple pronged solution. I mean, there's not one silver bullet within reforming Social Security, but we could do, by having greater immigration, by maybe raising the retirement age, and then also raising the cap. All of these provide more money into the system, and I think each one of them needs to be thoroughly thought about. But as a whole, one of the things that's a problem is Washington gridlock, right? I mean, we have known the Social Security issue for a number of years, but we have Democrats and Republicans fighting one another with different policy solutions to this. And one of the things, if I get into Congress, I really want to work on is not partisan politics, it's partnership politics. Being able to work across the Democrat-Republican divide to actually get something done. And I think all of the reforms that we've talked about with Social Security, I think aren't, is something that we could do to really save this vital, critical program, but it's going to require Democrats and Republicans sitting down and compromising, and that's something we've been unable to do in the last couple of years, and that's something that I want to try to bring if I was elected to Congress.
Do you have any ideas as to why we've built this gulf? I mean, there's always been Democrats and Republicans,
Yep.
but now we seem to be very much at loggerheads.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I mean, what we have is we've got sort of the far right in the party and the far left in the party kind of taking it over, and that's difficult when you have that. I mean, I think the country as a whole, whether it's on the right or the left, is somewhere closer to the middle. But I've recognized even in this primary that when you start to talk about being in the middle within a Democratic primary, it is very difficult. I mean, all of the candidates that I'm competing against are moving farther to the left, and it's who's the furthest to the left to get the nomination. But if you think about how are we going to make things work in Congress, it's going to take somebody who has ideas, who is innovative, but also who is trusted, and someone who is able to compromise. To reform something like Social Security and our other entitlement programs, it will take a compromise, and it's going to take somebody who can listen to people and sit down with people who are in the other party.
And is that why you consider yourself the best qualified?
I think it's one of the attributes that I have. I mean, I'm somebody who, my life career's work has been trying to get economic development in underserved communities. And these have been communities that are historically African American. So Harlem in New York City, Bronzeville on the south side of Chicago. I just finished a book about Shaw U Street in Washington, D.C. And so my work has tried to bridge the racial divide that we have in our country. And that's something that's very difficult to do. But I think I've been able to get at that a little bit. And I think if I'm able to sit down and bridge the white-black divide, I think I will be able to go to Congress and bridge the DR divide.
That divide right now is, one of its centers is Obamacare. So what's your take on Obamacare? Is there anything you would do to change it, or do you support it?
Yep.
What's your
well,
take?
Let me say the ideals of Obamacare in terms of getting more people health coverage in our country is critical, vital, and it's something I fully support and we needed to do. If I'm elected to Congress, one of the things that I will do is make sure that we maintain it. I mean, people are chipping away at this and trying to get it removed.
And it hasn't even started.
Yeah, and well, it's sort of started, slightly. But yes, I mean, one of the things is to maintain it. But the other thing, the reality about Obamacare is that it is, I think, the best thing for our country as a whole. But are there individuals that had a program, a healthcare program that maybe got altered or changed, or maybe they have to pay a little bit more? There are individual stories like that. We have to recognize that, yes, some people didn't get the best deal with Obamacare, but there are millions of people who are uninsured who are getting a very good deal. And so I think having greater health coverage for our entire nation and for millions of people is something that will bring down our health care costs and will benefit all Americans. And it's something that we need to have and we need to maintain.
We have about a minute and a half left. So why don't you just kind of wrap up and tell people why they should vote for you in 3 weeks and a wake up.
Sure. I mean, as we've talked about, I'm a professor at Virginia Tech, but I think more importantly for me, I'm a father of 2 beautiful young children. My daughter Barrett is 3. My son Avery, who's in public school in Alexandria, is 6. And I'm a husband, and my wife, I've talked a little about her, Allison. She's a federal contract worker. And I am somebody who deeply cares about this country. And there are some great qualified competitors that I'm competing with, but I think I bring a unique experience. I have academic experience. I have federal government experience. I also have experiences in communities, whether it's as a community organizer on the south side of Chicago. I did community organizing in Washington, D.C., and I think that unique combination is something that many of my other competitors don't bring to Congress, and I think that, along with sort of partnership politics, is something that will improve our country.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
Election.
Appreciate it, Jeff. Enjoyed it.
Some dreams are universal. Dreams that inspire us. Multiple sclerosis is a devastating disease that changes lives forever. The National MS Society does more for people with MS than any organization in the world. But we can't do it alone. To get involved, visit us online at nationalmssociety.org. or call 1-800-FIGHT-MS. This is why we're here. Because nobody dreams of having multiple sclerosis.
What's wrong with this picture? Half of young Americans can't locate economic powers like Japan and India. 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. Without geography, our children aren't ready for the world. Geography is everywhere. It's incredible creatures, rhythm, fashion, flavor. It's economics and politics. It's change. Understanding connections between people and places is critical in the 21st century. That's why we created mywonderfulworld.org. Go there now for your free parent and teacher action kits and give our kids the power of global knowledge. Because kids who understand our world today can succeed in it tomorrow.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Jeff Barnett. Now we're getting the inside scoop from our old friend Mark Levine. Mark is one of the smartest guys I know. Self-styled as the aggressive progressive, he has launched a massive media campaign. I guess that's starting today.
Starting tomorrow, actually.
Mark, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Jeff.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for the compliments. I appreciate it.
Well, they're well earned. And in fact, that probably didn't say anything strong enough. Well, I talked about the media buy. Let's talk about money in politics. That is a major issue.
It is.
Citizens United, voting rights. I mean,
ironically, that's what my ad's about. It's about getting money out of politics. You have to pay money to get money out of politics. It's a complete contradiction, but you do. That's unfortunately. It reminds me of Gorbachev. He had to sort of work within the system to try to dismantle the system. There's way too much money in politics.
Right.
And with the Citizens United decision, people like the Koch brothers, those two brothers have spent more than every single union in all of America in 2012. So all the millions, tens of millions of unionized workers, they gave, $10 or $20 or maybe $50. I doubt it was that high. And all the tens of millions together couldn't spend as much as these two very rich oil barons. We've got to get big money out of politics.
And how do we do that?
Well, Citizens United is a great place to start. Look, in order to overturn it, we need a constitutional amendment. Although, obviously, if we elect Democratic presidents enough, we can finally have a court that respects the Constitution, which, as you know, I carry with me wherever I go. Though I've got things in it now because of the campaign, I've got other things in my pocket. But that plus the McCutcheon decision, which basically allows a few people to spend so much money to control all of our politics. So that's the long way out of it. The short way out of it, though, I think, is the Disclose Act, which is a proposal Democrats have put forward that said, you know what, you want to buy our politics? At least disclose it. Let us know where the money is coming from. And then we know whether, you've got some corporation that's supporting your campaign or some, who knows what, some rich person. One of the things I found extraordinary, the Republicans, as you know, running for president, there's the Iowa caucus, there's the New Hampshire primary, there's a new one now called the Sheldon Adelson primary. And that occurs for the Las Vegas magnate, the great casino multi-billionaire, one of the richest men in the United States. And he's holding his own primary. And the Republican candidates for president of the United States are each appealing before him. I don't know whether they have to bow or curtsy. I don't know if that's a requirement at the Sheldon Adelson primary. But they're all flying out there and basically begging him for money. And I'm going around, I'm talking to voters all across the 8th Congressional District. It's great to meet so many people. The idea that candidates for president of the United States have to all bow down to this one man and spend all these hours trying to get his money. Somehow I don't think they're spending the same amount of time in Harlem or in Alexandria, for that matter.
It's Senator Reid, the Senate Majority Leader, is actually a big fan.
Well, Sheldon Adelson is from Nevada, and I'm sure Harry Reid has gotten his share of funds. Look, I'm not saying it's only the Republicans. This is both sides. This is both parties. It's the pernicious effect of money in politics. I support what they do in Europe, which is simply have public funding of campaigns. And, it wouldn't be that hard to do. Just what I would do is I'd allow people to take it off their taxes. It wouldn't cost people what would be the cost. Right now, we allow a $3 checkoff mark for the presidential campaign. I would allow a $10 checkoff mark, and I'd let people decide where that $10 goes. So you can't put it in your pocket, but you can decide, all right, I want it to go to Mark Levine running for Congress, or I want it to go to, who knows, some Tea Party person or a Green candidate perhaps. But if every citizen can direct those funds, and if you don't direct them, they go back to the Treasury, then we could have ordinary people having some of the same power as the Sheldon Adelsons of the world. There are 300 million Americans. Let's say there's 250 million adults. If each of them has $10 to spend, that's $2.5 billion. What a great counterweight to the billionaires who put a lot of money in campaigns. It's a creative idea, but then again, I like creative ideas.
Well, another person who likes creative ideas is Elizabeth Warren.
Yes, my role model.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. You talk a lot about Elizabeth Warren, and you talk about Barney Frank.
Right. It's in my ad. Which you can find at levineforcongress.com, by the way.
There are other leaders, though, in the Democratic Party. Our own Senator Kaine and our own Senator Warner. But
those are not my role models. And I like Senator Kaine. I like Senator Warner, but they're not my role models.
What is it about Elizabeth Warren?
Elizabeth Warren, she's outstanding. The thing about Elizabeth Warren is not only is she brilliant, and she's one of the smartest candidates in Congress, but she is tough. She is strong. She not only is very, very smart, which there are other smart people in Congress, but she goes out, she defends her principles. She doesn't figure out what will play in Peoria, so to speak. She doesn't figure out what can be done. She just says this should be done, and she's got logic to back it up, and she's tough, and she fights for it, and when people tell her no, she keeps fighting. And that's what I love about Elizabeth Warren, and that's why I style myself Elizabeth Warren Democrat. Too many Democrats, in my opinion, they look to see what can be accomplished. They say, well, the Republicans won't allow this, maybe they'll allow this, maybe they'll allow this. And before you know it, they've compromised so far that we have a Republican solution. To me, the clearest example is the Affordable Care Act.
Right,
Obamacare, right? Obamacare, it's ironic that it has his name attached to it. The Republicans first attached his name to it. Obamacare began as a Heritage Foundation proposal from the Conservative Heritage Foundation, which Mitt Romney, the Republican governor, put forward in Massachusetts.
And actually the key point from the Heritage was the individual mandate.
That's right. That was the thing they most wanted.
Which is kind of the Satan within the bill today for many Republicans.
Irony within ironies. So, look, I agree the Affordable Care Act is better than what we had before. It has provided millions of people with insurance that didn't have it before. So I'm not knocking it as a step forward. But the way I see it, what Elizabeth Warren did, or does, and what Barney Frank did, is we start where we live. We start with progressive values, and we live on our turf. And let me just give you a clear example. Universal care. Universal care is in 40 nations on Earth. Now, we are the richest country on Earth, and our life expectancy is 40th. There are 40 nations that live longer than we do. In the richest country on Earth, every single one of them has universal care. And countries in Europe, England, France, Italy, Finland, Canada, our neighbor to the north, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, they all have universal care. They all live longer than we do, and they pay half the cost.
Right.
They live longer than we do, they pay half the cost. What's the problem? I don't understand it. So I say, for people who don't want universal care, I say, you tell me why some poor kid should be sick and die. And I've even had Tea Partiers, they come on my show and I say, all right, I get it, you don't want universal care. You want some 6-year-old to die from some illness. Oh, we don't want that kid to die. You don't want the kid to die? Oh, so you'll give them emergency care, and then we talk about how emergency care is so much more expensive than preventative care. And I say, you can wait till someone has a heart attack, but heart medicine's a lot cheaper than heart surgery.
But slow down now.
Sure.
How do you get the costs down without, what you're talking about, we spend 17% of GDP for healthcare, and it's heading towards 20%.
And we're the highest of any industrialized nation in the world.
The Germans, for example, French, the Brits, they're 8 to 11%. Japanese,
about half. That's right.
So how do you get these costs down?
You get rid of the insurance companies. Did I lose some votes there? You get rid of the health insurance companies. I'm sorry, they're making a lot off the top. And hospitals, I'm going to lose some more votes. Hospitals charge an amazing fortune. But you know what? To me, it's about what's right, not about the votes. There's a wonderful article, you've probably read it, Jeff, Stephen Brill wrote in Time Magazine. It was the only issue of Time Magazine to be fully devoted to an article. If you haven't read that article, you have.
Like 60,000 words or something, just immense.
But you know what? It reads quickly. I read those 36 pages because it just describes detail after detail of $100 aspirins and someone who has indigestion and goes to the emergency room and then is charged $7,000 or something for Pepto-Bismol. The costs are not only extraordinary, they're almost made up. They're so ridiculous in cost. And they won't even tell you what those costs are. This happened to me, by the way. I wanted to change my health insurance plan a few years back, and I take cholesterol medication. And so I called the Blue Cross Blue Shield. I called the company, the same company. I was just changing plans within the same company. I said, how much will it cost for this cholesterol medication? Oh, we can't tell you.
Right.
I said, no, I'm looking at buying your plan. Just tell me what it costs on the new plan. We can't tell you that. I said, well, how will you know what to charge me? Oh, once you buy our plan, then we can tell you what we charge you. And I was thinking to myself, if I were in a drive-through in a restaurant and I said, I'll take the hamburger, how much is it? Oh, we can't tell you after you buy the hamburger, sir. $100. What? Well, you bought the hamburger. I mean, it's no other industry is like this. And that's why no other country in the world suffers the way we do. But my larger point about progressive values, we should start where we live. And we should make them argue why it is in the richest country on earth, someone should be denied health care. I believe everyone should get health care. I think it's a basic human right. I think when someone can be cured at relatively low cost, you do that. Now, maybe it's from my moral sense, but let someone argue, no, I want the kids to die. They rarely make that argument. And so instead of saying, please, sir, can I have a little bit of health care for a few people? I say, give it to everyone, and you make the argument why it shouldn't happen. I did the same thing with marriage equality, by the way. With marriage equality, there were people in the gay lesbian community that said, please, sir, can I have hospital visitation? Can I have a few rights? And I said, we deserve equal rights under the law. You tell me why gay people should be second-class citizens, and we'll talk about it. But if you start where we live, that everyone should have health care, that everyone should have equal rights on the law, and you make them defend why someone should get less than the other, then we're arguing on progressive turf.
And actually, that's kind of what the conservatives did.
Sure, they play that game.
Barry Goldwater's conscience of a conservative. It was like, okay, let's put the flag down and then work from there.
Well, let's put our flag down. To me, that's what being aggressive progressive is all about. Too many Democrats look to see how can we give the Tea Party what they want. If you start with the Romney proposal and then you move further to the right to compromise with the Tea Party, you're to the right of Romney. And the American people didn't vote for Romney. They voted for Obama. So let's move to the left of Obama. Let's pull the middle. I actually think President Obama wants us to challenge him from the left. He said so. He wants us to say, President Obama, you're not being progressive enough, because then he's in the middle of the debate rather than seeing it. Now they look at the Romney proposal and they call it socialism. It just isn't, and we need to call it what it is.
We've got a couple of minutes before the first break. The 8th Congressional District is relatively unique in the sense that it is right next to the Capitol. You're going to be sleeping in your own bed every night. You have a bully pulpit that you can use from this. That seems to be an immense, both an advantage and a responsibility for whomever the 8th people elect to be their congressman.
I agree with you. The representative of the 8th Congressional District is in many ways the federal representative. I mean, the representative from the District of Columbia has no voice, and it's unfortunate, and I of course support DC statehood and full representation for the District of Columbia. But barring that, we're the next best thing. In fact, I like to tell people I live within the boundaries of the old District of Columbia, because I do. I live in Old Town Alexandria. So many people in the 8th Congressional District work for the federal government, work as contractors for the federal government. There are a lot of veterans in the district. This is a very patriotic district. And one of the things that I've done for years now is I go out on national TV and I tell the people in Idaho and Texas how patriotic the people here are, because we get it here. I don't think they always understand it out there.
Arlington National Cemetery is inside your district.
Absolutely.
I'm Jeff Barnett. This is the Inside Scoop. We're talking with Mark Levine, candidate for the United States Congress. We'll be back after this break. Thank you.
I need a job.
Necesito trabajo. I would like to speak English better. Me gustaría hablar inglés mejor.
I want to be a U.S. citizen.
Quisiera ser ciudadano de los Estados Unidos.
For over 35 years,
Por más de 35 años,
the Hispanic Committee of Virginia has been serving our community.
el Comité Hispano de Virginia ha estado sirviendo a nuestra comunidad.
Job training and placement,
Capacitación, ayuda para conseguir trabajo,
education for children and adults,
educación para niños y adultos,
immigration, naturalization, and medical referrals.
ayuda para los procesos de inmigración y naturalización y orientación sobre médicos
Are a small part of what we do.
son solo una pequeña parte de lo que hacemos.
For help, information, or to volunteer,
Para ayuda, información o para ofrecerse como voluntario,
contact the Hispanic Committee of Virginia,
comuníquese con el Comité Hispano de Virginia,
helping everyone participate more fully in American society.
ayudando a todos a participar plenamente en la sociedad norteamericana.
Hey Lena, where's yours?
Would you notice if you were missing half your kidney function? According to the National Kidney Foundation, 20 million people have chronic kidney disease, and 20 million more may be at risk and not even know it. Anyone with high blood pressure, diabetes, or family history of chronic kidney disease is at risk. Early diagnosis is vitally important. To get the whole story, talk to your doctor and visit the National Kidney Foundation at kidney.org or call for a free brochure. Because when it comes to chronic kidney disease, you might not know the half.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folk, but for others, it might take a little more work. And for those who
Welcome back. I'm Jeff Barnett. This is the Inside Scoop. We're talking with Mark Levine, candidate for the United States Congress in Virginia's 8th Congressional District. For those of you not familiar with the 8th, it is Alexandria, Arlington, a little bit of Falls Church, and 44% of it is Fairfax County, really the area south of the Beltway, right along the Potomac.
And within the Beltway, a good part within the Beltway as well.
Mark, let's just kind of go down to some of the big issues.
Sure.
And
let's do it.
None of them are easy. NSA, Snowden. The other night at one of the debates, the question was, is Snowden a traitor or a hero? Where are we going with privacy? Where are we going? How much are we going to be letting the federal government have access to our personal information?
Well, you ask me a question like this, you're going to make me take out my Constitution again. Because the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, which I read at the last debate, by the way, says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated unless you have a specific warrant with probable cause. You have to get a court order to say that it's okay to get a warrant. There's no way you could spy on 300 million Americans and make it legal under the Constitution of the United States. Unless all 300 million of us have done some kind of crime, and I don't think that's true, there's no reason to do it. When George Bush did it, I came on this show, on the Inside Scoop, and in fact, it's still the beginning of the Inside Scoop show that I hosted. Every single week begins, the government is spying on hundreds of millions of Americans. Does the president know this document, which he's sworn to uphold? And that was actually a critique on President Bush. So when President Obama did the same thing, I have to criticize him as well. It's not a Democratic-Republican thing. It's a constitutional thing. The president has no right. I don't care whether it's metadata. I don't care it's who we call. The government has no right to know how many times I call my mother. I call her a lot. She's fine, but it's none of their business. And it's really offensive. It's offensive to our Constitution, and it should be overturned. It should be illegal. As for Edward Snowden, we didn't need Snowden. I was talking about this back in 2005. Right. I'm glad it happened only because I'm glad American people are talking about it. I don't think Snowden went about it the right way. There are ways that whistleblowers should go through. You talk to your supervisor, you talk to your supervisor, you go all the way up to the President of the United States, and then if you don't get results, yes, absolutely, you go to the press.
Let me go back here a little bit, though. When you're out knocking on doors, you're talking with people, are they upset about the NSA protocols?
I don't get that a lot. No, I hear a lot about the environment. I hear about climate change. I hear about educational costs. I hear about income inequality.
People are well aware that this is going on, and they kind of trust the government now.
No, I don't know that it means they trust the government. I think it means that it's so amorphous and so large and so big brotherish, and people feel there's nothing they can do about it. It's like, oh, well, I guess they're reading all my emails. I can't do it. I think there's a certain hopelessness about it.
No, they're not reading all your emails.
I know, but they're reading the metadata. They're reading who you send the emails to.
They're capturing the metadata.
They're capturing it, and it's going in a massive database.
Which can be abused, I got it.
And at least according to Snowden, it is being abused. According to Snowden, they actually are going through and using it for illicit purposes. Now, we don't know if it's true. Like I said, if he'd worked within the system and stayed home, we could have found out if it's true. But we need court oversight of all of this. And I think that people are a little too lax with their privacy. I'm the kind of guy, I didn't want Google, monitoring all of my movements. I don't want the government doing it. It's just a basic freedom. It reminds me of the Stasi, East Germany. It's just not exactly what I think of in a free country.
Okay.
But to be fair, it's not an issue that many people bring up. It's true.
Yeah. What do they bring up? Immigration. Do they bring up immigration?
Some bring up immigration, absolutely. Most support immigration reform. Some don't. Some even Democrats don't. And then we get into a good discussion where I talk about immigrants being the lifeblood of America and the fact that the vast, vast majority of us are descendants of immigrants or immigrants ourselves or came on slave ships. But, as I said last night in the debate, 2 nights ago in the debate, the only people who have a right to complain are Native Americans. The rest of us have no right to complain about new immigrants. and what makes America great is the fact that we have all these cultures and ethnicities and religions and races here. Every other nation is based on some race, religion, ethnicity. And what makes America great is precisely all the creativity that comes from this mix of populations. So I like very much the immigrants in America, and I very much support their making it easier for them to be here.
But going forward, is there anything that you would change about, because you could have a total amnesty for people who are here illegally. You could do that right now, and we would still be having the same conversation in 5 years from now.
Well, I would have much easier, I would have much more open borders. Now, not to terrorists, not to criminals. There are people who legitimately shouldn't be here. That's true. But in general, when my great-grandparents came here in 1906, more than 100 years ago, with no money, they came here to live the American dream. They also came because they were escaping religious persecution. But the point is, America was the place to go. And I don't think today's Mexican immigrants are any less hardworking than my great-grandparents' generation or the great-great-great-grandparents of other people here. I think every immigrant comes here and tries to work hard. And like I said, not the criminals, not the terrorists. But in general, it's too hard to get here legally. I was talking to a group of Filipino Americans, and I looked up how long it takes if you are legally here and you want to bring in a Filipino brother or sister legally here. They are now accepting applications from 1989. 25 years ago. So if you filed when your brother was 25, he's now 50. That's a very different life. And it just doesn't make any sense. We've always been a country enriched by our immigrants. I think we continue to be enriched by our immigrants. Tax policy. Tax policy. I believe that taxes are too high on the middle class and too low on the rich. Look, actually it's interesting because Don Beyer disagrees with me on this. Don Beyer wants to repeal the estate tax, which he calls the death tax. He and Republicans call the death tax. Really? I disagree with him on that because I think income inequality is a serious problem. The estate tax affects 0.4% of all Americans. And it's basically it means that if you leave more than $10 million to your sons and daughters, then on the 11th million you have to pay some tax. To me, if you get 10 million tax-free, you're probably okay. You probably won't want for much. I'm much more concerned about the young girl growing up in the ghetto who, if she had food and education, she might have the cure for cancer someday. I don't believe that poor people are less morally than rich people. I don't believe that a child who is lucky enough to be born in a rich family is any better than a child who's unlucky enough to be born in a poor family. To me, this caste system is un-American. We ran against the crown. I mean, we did a revolution against dukes and earls and landed estates and barons. I don't know why we want to bring that back into a country where, well, if your father is rich, then you don't have to work, and your children's children never ever have to work a day in their life. I believe that every American should have an equal chance to succeed. And so, that's why, like I said, I disagree with Don Beyer on the estate tax. I think that if very rich people don't pay this tax, who's going to pay it? Middle class people. They got to pay the money some way. So I'm very concerned about things like that. On Social Security, you are in favor of dispensing with the cap, is that correct? That's correct. I'm in favor of expanding Social Security. It's right here on my walk card. It's interesting, when the debate began, all the other candidates said they wanted to preserve Social Security, and I was the only one saying I wanted to expand Social Security. But I got to tell you, the other candidates were listening, because now a number of them are agreeing with me that they want to expand Social Security by lifting the cap. So the cap is $117,000, and basically right now, 94% of Americans pay 6.2% is actually what they pay into Social Security. And that's what most of us pay, and they may not even know that very rich people... Unearned income, right. It doesn't even count capital gains, and right. You're absolutely right about that. If you're a millionaire, you pay less than 1%. If you're a billionaire, you pay less than 1,000th of 1%. Now, I don't know why Donald Trump pays a much smaller percentage than his janitor of his income, but that doesn't make any sense. It's a regressive tax. So if we lift the cap, we not only have enough money to ensure Social Security for 100 years, easy, but enough also to expand it so that no one who's worked 40 hours a week all their life has to have old age and poverty. No one should have to do that. Right. And now some other candidates have adopted that position. I'm glad to see it. I'm pushing them to the left. There's a question that I asked Derek on the first part of the show as to why he thought he was the best qualified candidate to represent the 8th District in Congress.
Why do you believe you're the best qualified candidate?
Number of reasons. For one thing, I've worked in the federal government. My mentor, Barney Frank, was perhaps the best mentor you could have. He was aggressive and progressive, but also effective.
Right.
Barney Frank got things done. Here's what's interesting. People tell me all the time, and I think they're wrong. They tell me, Mark, if you're out there fighting for progressive values, how can you possibly make a deal with Republicans behind the scenes? Those things are inconsistent. I actually think they're extremely consistent, and I'll tell you why. I used to be a trial lawyer. I love to go to trial. I was good at trials. I won my trials. I'm a litigator, right. Because I was good at trials, I got great settlements behind the scenes because they knew that if they weren't nice to me behind the scenes, I was going to take them to trial and I probably would enjoy it. I do the same thing in the media. I go on hundreds of TV shows, national. As you know, I've been on Bill O'Reilly's show, Megyn Kelly's, Fox, MSNBC, international. I've done thousands of radio shows. And they know I enjoy it. No question, I enjoy going on TV and throwing my Constitution around at Bill O'Reilly. Because I enjoy it, they know that if they don't work with me nicely behind the scenes, I'm going to call them out in public. And that's what Barney Frank did. And because he did that, we got a lot done behind the scenes. We got a lot of agreement with Republicans. He passed some amazing legislation because people were a little bit afraid of him, and that's not such a bad thing. If people are willing to be reasonable behind the scenes, I'll never go out in public. But if they're not, they know I won't hesitate to. And I have a louder voice than the other candidates in this race. I can be very loud, but more importantly, I have the media attention that we need in this district. I would argue that maybe 10%, maybe not even, I don't think even 40 members of Congress regularly go on national, international shows every week. Probably 20, maybe 15. There are not that many that do that.
But a lot of them from this area, Chris Van Hollen,
Donna
Eric
Edward.
Granter,
That's right.
Eric Cantor, Prince George's County.
Keith Ellison? Donna Edwards.
Well,
she does a little bit too. But it's important because to get the needs met here, sometimes we have to persuade people who live outside the district. I like to have more than one vote. I admit it. If you go to Congress and you're quiet and you cast your Democratic vote and you go home and then you lose 230 to 218, you haven't accomplished very much. 215, I should say. But if you can go on TV and you can convince 15, 20, 30 people to change their minds, or you can convince their constituents to call their members of Congress and say, I saw Mark Levine, he made a good point. I can have more than one vote. I can have 10 votes, 20 votes, 30 votes for the people of the 8th Congressional District. And that's pretty good, to have more than one vote for the people here. I want to do that.
30 seconds left. So last words for our audience.
I would say the last words are that it's basically going to come down to Don Beyer and myself. And we're very different people. And he's a good man, he's a nice man, he's more from the moderate conservative Democratic school. I'm from the aggressive progressive school. In the 8th Congressional District, you have a choice in this primary. You have a choice among Democrats. Make that choice on June 10th because we may sit in this seat for 10, 20, 30 years the way Jim Moran did. The primary on June 10th is your chance to choose whether you want a fighter or someone who goes along to get along. Those are nice people, but I'm a fighter. Thank you, Mark.
It's marvelous to have you here.
It's always a privilege to be here. Thank you. You're doing a good job here, taking over your